Hi, everyone. I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Arthur Bryant. Arthur, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm going to give you a quick introduction for anyone who doesn't know who you are. You are a leading Title IX attorney in the United States, a two-time most influential attorney in America winner, and you litigated in the first Title IX case specific to college athletics. Is that correct?
That is all correct. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And then personally, I've known you for quite a few years. You guided my team and I when we were working on the Fair Play for Women Act at Voice in Sport many years ago. And I've just learned so much from you. And a lot of what you've told me and shared with me has influenced so much of my career and my advocacy work. So this is such a full circle moment for you to be on the show.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much.
The conversation that we're about to have is probably a lot deeper than most of the athletes on the show have had before. But my hope is that from listening to my past episode, just giving, the basics of Title IX, that this will ignite something in someone, hopefully, and give some answers to some questions.
Fabulous.
So, one of the biggest things going on right now in Title IX is these conversations with schools around NIL, revenue sharing, money, compliance. There's so much. What does it mean that the Biden administration, the Department of Education, has an interpretation of Title IX versus the Trump administration interpretation of Title IX?
Of course. Well, so let me back up first a second.
Okay.
Title IX itself is really very few, small number of words. The basic principle is, and the basic law, what it says is it prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex by any educational institution receiving federal funds. Period. The United States Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights then had to, over decades, take that principle and say, how does it apply to athletics? How does it apply to equal opportunities to play, to athletic financial aid and treatment? Where it came in with name, image, and likeness, of course, the original regulations developed those principles, but didn't specifically apply to name, image, and likeness because colleges weren't paying for that. And I should say, it's to make it very clear, Title IX does not always automatically apply to NIL payments. Title IX only applies to educational institutions that receive federal funds. So, for example, if Pizza Hut says, we're going to give $500 a month to every football player at this university and nothing to the women, Title IX doesn't apply because Pizza Hut is not an educational institution receiving federal funds. But if Pizza Hut and the school cut a deal,
Hmm.
that Pizza Hut's going to do that. And Pizza Hut becomes the official pizza provider of the school. And the school's logo is on the Pizza Hut box. And the Pizza Hut is helping recruit the target recruit for the football team. Well, then Title IX, the school's, directly involved. They're working together, and Title IX totally applies. For a while, schools were trying to avoid Title IX applying to NIL by saying, oh, there's a collective that is doing this for
Yeah.
us. And they're like Pizza Hut, right? But the
Yeah.
truth is they're not like Pizza Hut. If you go
Yeah.
up, it's clear they're working hand in hand. And in the NCAA versus House settlement, where they're going to pay money that would have been paid by the schools, and they're now purporting to say, and it will exempt from Title IX liability for these payments all the schools who are covered by Title IX. You know, we are, and many others saying Title IX applies to these payments.
Hmm.
And that settlement also would authorize schools to make payments in the future directly from the schools. And of course, we know Title IX will apply to those. But the question that came up is about, I guess, 2 months ago, or no, yeah, the Biden administration issued an interpretation that said, look, we've been interpreting this statute for decades, and we're not changing our interpretation at all, but we are saying how it applies to NIL payments. If the school is directly paying money, that's really athletic financial aid.
Hmm.
And the principles we have that apply to athletic financial aid apply, which is it has to be proportional to the men and the women. If women are 54% of the athletes, they should be getting 54% of the athletic financial aid dollars. And in this case, 54% of the name, image, and likeness dollars. And that was what the Biden administration's interpretation said. And the Trump administration came in and said, we are withdrawing that. We don't think that's true. But it was true based on the principles that the Office for Civil Rights had generated for decades. They didn't come up with any other alternative. And the only real argument, if the school is going to be involved, is do you look at it as athletic financial aid or do you look at it as treatment and benefits? Because either way, it's covered. And
Hmm.
I should just say one other thing, which is that because people don't get this, when Title IX was passed, there was a strong effort, including by the NCAA and men's sports supporters, to say it shouldn't apply to revenue producing sports. It shouldn't apply to football or men's basketball. They should be exempt from Title IX. And Congress said, absolutely not. This is a civil rights law. It requires equality and prohibits sex discrimination. We're not making an exception that you can discriminate against people that make money. We're not making an exception. You can discriminate against women to avoid losing money or because men would rather pay to watch men play than women play when we haven't promoted women's sports for decades and we've promoted men's sports. So law is very, very clear that all of these name, image, and likeness payments, whatever is generating them, wherever the money is coming from, if the school is involved, they're covered by Title IX, and they have to be the way women and men are treated as a result of NIL payments and through NIL payments, they have to be treated equally.
That's such a good point about the investment in women's sports that eventually turns into revenue or lack of revenue. A big part of what I've been doing lately is talking to different athletic directors, to athletic departments about gender equity, diversity, the overall student athlete experience. And in lots of these conversations, what I've been hearing is, well, the interpretation of the law is changing constantly. If you guys remember from the last episode, the Office of Civil Rights isn't that large. It doesn't really have that much power and ability to regulate this. It seems like for the next 3 years, we're kind of in the clear for Title IX. At this point, athletic directors kind of have the option, it seems like, to decide what Title IX means to them and what gender equity means to them. What do you have to say about that? What would you recommend?
I would recommend that they comply with Title IX, which is a federal law that has existed for now 53 years. They don't have the option to choose to discriminate against women because they'd rather do that. It's the law. Now, if they want to say, I don't care, I'm breaking the law, I am purposely going to discriminate against women because I'm not going to get caught or because it's not going to be enforced. If they can live with that, well, okay, but it's not the right thing to do. It's not that Title IX is not clear here. Title IX is very clear here. Like I said at the very start, the principle is absolutely clear. There are separate programs for men and women. The women and men in them need to be treated equally, including with NIL payments, if the school's involved in the NIL payments. And the fact that some are helping you make more money doesn't matter because you can't discriminate against people to make money or to avoid losing money, or because some people would rather give their money to see or to benefit men and women. That's called discrimination. You just can't do it, and Title IX prohibits it.
So, when we were working on the Fair Play for Women Act, which the listeners are very familiar with, one of our biggest things that we wanted to hit was saying that the NCAA should be responsible for Title IX. Does the NCAA pulling in all of these different schools and conferences for this House case, does it set up a precedent where they could eventually be held responsible for Title IX?
I think there already is precedent for Title IX to apply to the NCAA. There was a case called Smith versus NCAA back, I think it was in 1999 or something like that, in the US Supreme Court. The person who was suing said the NCAA is covered by Title IX because its member institutions, the colleges and universities, pay dues and they're covered by Title IX. And the Supreme Court, in a decision by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, said, no, 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 just the payment of dues itself, that's not enough. to get the NCAA covered by Title IX. But there are two possible ways the NCAA could be covered by Title IX. We just didn't get clear argument about that in this case. So we leave that till another case. And one of those arguments was that the NCAA was taking federal funds for something called the National Youth Sports Program. And that was true. And back when I was at Public Justice, we sued and got a court ruling saying that the NCAA was covered by Title IX. Effectively because of the National Youth Sports Program. But the NCAA has never taken another federal dollar, so they've avoided that. But the other argument was that Justice Ginsburg identified was if the schools that are covered by Title IX have delegated to the NCAA their responsibilities for example, overseeing championship competitions, well, then the NCAA could be covered by Title IX because you can't avoid Title IX coverage by just giving your responsibilities away to some other organization to run for you. And we believe that's what's been happening for a long time. The reality, though, is very few people even brought suits about that because most of the time when the school directly discriminates against you, there's no need to sue the NCAA. You just sue your school.
Mhm.
So the law has not been fully established there, but we believe the NCAA is and will be covered by Title IX.
I think often when we talk about Title IX compliance, when I've spoken to schools about it in the past few years, they're like, hey, we have so many different things. How do you expect us to report all of this? How do you expect us to be perfect? We can't be perfect. And they use that as a defense. What is your advice for programs or who are struggling with this when it comes to compliance? What does compliance mean in the more real sense of day to day at a university?
I think those are all valid statements that you can't have perfection. I mean, Title IX doesn't require dollar expenditures that are exactly equal. Because if you treat everybody the same, some sports things cost more. So
Hmm.
if you gave A+ uniforms to every team, the football team's uniforms are going to cost more, and you're going to spend more on the uniforms for the football team. And those expenditure differences don't make a difference. Doesn't mean it's discrimination. But of course, if you give the football team brand new uniforms every 3 games and they're A+ uniforms, and the women, one uniform a season and it's a C- uniform, that's discrimination. And they're going to be a bigger dollar difference. And none of it can justify what way too many, particularly major schools, do. They're doing things like before every home game, the football team is put up in a hotel.
Hmm.
No women's team gets treated that way, but it's not team by team. So in other words, close to 100 men are being put up every home game in a hotel when zero women are. Don't try to tell me that's because of little fluctuations and you can't keep track of it. When we settle these cases, we bring in gender equity specialists. It's really not very hard for them to come up with a plan to get the school in compliance. If a gender equity specialist can do it for us and schools when we threaten to sue them, they can do it for the schools without that. Any school that tells me it's too hard to figure out is welcome to call me, and I'm happy, to advise them on how to get into compliance. Um,
Right, right. If
it's
you're too
doable.
expensive, they can give me a ring.
There we go. Perfect.
Oh, I appreciate that answer. And I mean, it's really interesting. I've gone to so many different schools. I've talked to so many people, and the statement is always, we are committed to Title IX. Well, let me see that. Let me see that commitment. Let's see the statements. Let's see the accurate numbers. Let's see all of those things. There's so much to talk about with you, and maybe one day we'll get to the rest of it. But my last question for you is forward thinking. It's still a dream of mine to get the Fair Play for Women Act passed or something similar. But something that's come up for me is realizing, right, if we can make changes to Title IX, then other people can make changes. We're seeing a lot around trans athletes. We're seeing a big push of, like we talked about with revenue sharing and NIL. What is the possibility that the framework we see now for Title IX could be changed?
Oh, I think it could possibly be changed for the better. It could be possibly changed for the worse. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this Congress or this president to change it for the better.
Mhm.
But the real issue here is that the law as it stands is quite good and quite strong, and it just needs to be enforced.
Okay.
And the sad reality is that, and the whole history of Title IX shows, is if women want equality, they got to stand up and fight for it. Almost every woman at any major school, at least in this country, could bring a Title IX case right now if she wanted to. They need to check out the figures. They need to reach out to lawyers. They need to be willing to stand up and fight. Lawyers like me can help. We can educate. We can file the lawsuits. We can represent those athletes. But lawyers can't file lawsuits without clients.
Mhm.
Women can advocate on their own, but if they have to be willing to go to court if they want to enforce the law, because otherwise the schools are proving they're not going to comply with it. And what Title IX has proven is when they do, they almost always win. I've never lost one of these cases, not because I'm the world's greatest lawyer, but because the schools are so plainly in violation of Title IX, it's not that hard to show it. Most of the schools settle without even a lawsuit because when you approach them, all right, so they got to get into compliance. I mean, they knew it was coming eventually. It's just a question of when. And when is when the women stand up and fight.
Yeah. And I would say my schools hate slash love me because that's a question that I'm always asking and trying to look into and encouraging my friends to do the same. If you're an athlete listening to this right now and any of this has tugged at you, I really encourage you to keep doing research. I'm going to include Arthur's information in the show notes and all of the posts and everything. And we always have the Let's Talk About It resource page, which I update weekly. So if you want to know more about Title IX or any of the other topics we've discussed today, look at that. Arthur, do you have anything else to say before we wrap up the episode today?
No, just thank you for inviting me. And Sydney, you and everybody out there, um, fundamentally, the discrimination against women in our country and in sports is just wrong. We've got to fight it. What is so disturbing to me is how many men don't get it until they have a daughter.
Yep.
And it goes, then it's like, oh yeah, what do you mean my daughter doesn't get as treatment that's as good as my son? That's outrageous. And they get worked up. And what, if anything, shows is that if people start standing up and fighting, and women's sports gets promoted and supported, Caitlin Clark alone proves women can be just as successful as men, including in the marketing arena, if they're given the opportunity. Uh, but they need to be given the opportunity, and that's what Title IX is all about.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Arthur.
Great, thank you so much.
Hey guys, it's Sydney. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. If you did, make sure to leave a review and send it to a friend. Let's keep this conversation going. I'll see you guys next week.